Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session on cnHeat. Today's session is being recorded. If you have questions at any time during the presentation, please enter those into the questions panel. Now I'll pass the webinar over to Dan Sullivan, who is Director of System Architecture here at Cambium Networks. Dan, feel free to take it from here.
Thanks, Livia. So I'm Daniel Sullivan, and I work on cnHeat, and also with me is Seth Boucher, who is the technical leader for cnHeat. So if you have any question whatsoever of anything, please ask, and we'll both try to answer your questions. You can always reach me at daniel.sullivan@cambiumnetworks.com, and I'll give out Seth. Seth is just seth.boucher@cambiumnetworks.com. We'd love to hear from you. Today, what we wanted to share with you is we have an innovation that we've come out with that mirrors the timing for CBRS here in the United States. And we've extended cnHeat to support near line of sight and non-line of sight in 3 gigahertz. And so we're going to tell you a little bit about it and show you an example of what it does and the power of it and how it can help you to extend your networks and to be able to reach customers easily from an installation perspective for those customers that are now behind trees that you can reach with our 450M, 450I, and any other 3 gigahertz product you may have. So real briefly, cnHeat 3 gigahertz near line of sight, non-line of sight is a new feature to your subscription. It's part of your subscription. So if you already have it, a cnHeat subscription, and you have 3 gigahertz where it has line of sight, we'll extend this to you as part of the subscription for free. Just let us know in case we forget. We are starting to roll this out to customers, so just remind us in case we miss it. So why is near line of sight, non-line of sight so important all of a sudden? I mean, it always is, but why it's so important here is in the 3 gigahertz spectrum, especially CBRS, where we have additional EARP that can be utilized for coverage, it really is now we have lots of use cases where customers can be reached where they don't have a straight line of sight from the tower. And there's 2 main reasons for that. Like the first, as I was saying, is there's increased maximum EARP for your APs. You can go up to 50 dBm for 20 megahertz channel now with Part 96 rules. And then also 3 gigahertz just propagates better than 5 gigahertz. And so that helps get through the trees too. As a result, Seth and I have been working on a near line of sight, non-line of sight propagation model. And we have come up with something that we think is really good. We think it's best in class, or at least I do. And it provides you a good mean as to that means 0. It's pretty accurate, and there's a low standard deviation away from the actual real result with the predicted result. So in other words, we think our predictions are pretty accurate and will really greatly help you. And as always, you access cnHeat the same way as you do in the past. If you want to see it demoed, you go to cnHeat.cambiumnetworks.com and you use the same account name and password of demo. That's account name of cnHeat. So let's do this. Let's do a demonstration here, because that's the best, I think. And we're going to take you to a 3 gigahertz 450M site that we have up here. And you'll notice that everything looks the same as in previous versions of cnHeat. What you have here is you have your slider, which shows you the height anywhere from 80 to 0 feet. And remember, you configure this dynamically, and so you can keep seeing the different heights. You can also control your signal strength anywhere from neg 100 to neg 40. And real briefly down here, when it's in this view, the arrow's pointing this way. RSSI values are being shown. So you're seeing coverage of RSSI. So this is 80-foot coverage for SMs, and this is showing the RSSIs that they would have. So you can see we have a single 450M AP pointed to the north, and you can see the hot coverage in the coverage map, the ARC coverage map there, but you can see the coverage behind it too. And then over here, if we were to change this pointer down here, since it's showing, hey, RSSI view, now we show coverage on height view, and you can see that the coverage where it's really low, right at the ground at 0 feet, is purple, and when it's really high, it's blue, it's there. So you can see the purples are closer to the tower and the blues are further away. So let's do this. We'll do one other thing right here is there's a new button that we have. If you look over here, the same logic that we've had before, line of sight height above clutter, is right here. And so this means that we'll show you line of sight coverage, and it's how many feet are above the ground or the building or the tree, whatever's the tallest thing. So it's line of sight, height above clutters, height above the tallest thing. Now when we click the button here, we go into near non-line of sight coverage. And this is height above the ground. And we'll explain to you a little bit more in the presentation why it's different. But previously, if we look at it, so the coverage has changed, there's more. But if we look at line of sight coverage, right, like if you hit anything like a tree or building, you aren't going to get much coverage if it's strictly a line of sight, like in 5 gigahertz. And so that's why we go above the tallest item. Here on non-line of sight, we can shoot under trees. So if we were to go above the tallest item, we would miss the coverage below, like trees and stuff like that. So now we need to make sure that we're above the ground, because we can be under a tree and still have coverage, and I'm going to show you an example of that. But once again, look, the coverage is already looks like better at 80 feet than it did with non-line of sight than it did with line of sight. Now, if I lower this down to, let's do this, let's go back. Here's line of sight. If I go to 13 feet, this is 13 feet above clutter. So it's above the tallest item, and you can see the coverage, right? This is all your line of sight coverage for this tower and the RSSI values. If I switch this to non-line of sight, this is 13 feet high. So it's actually going to be lower in the places where there's clutter and it's up on top, but you can see that the coverage for this 450M from Cambium, it lights up, and you see that not only do you have the little coverage that you had before in line of sight, but now there's just an incredible amount of coverage that you can actually do in non-line of sight, and it's really showing you the value you got by your purchase of the 450M. The link budget is high, and then also you can see that with lots of customers, you can put the MIMO into place and really have a benefit as compared to other products like LTE where they don't have the MIMO, right? Because there's tons and tons of customers you are now hitting due to having the non-line of sight ability from 450M. Okay, now let's do this. Let us zoom into an area here with some customers here. And I'm going to go back to line of sight. Here, if I go back to line of sight, what we see here is the tower. It's just right down here, right? And here, just to the north, a short distance, there's line of sight because there's no trees. You can see trees, bam, affects your line of sight. We all understand that. You can see that some of the farms to the right here can see the tower. But over to the left on this side of the road, there's some homes here. And if we look at them, they do not have line of sight. So under the old model, it wouldn't show you the coverage. Now, this is at 13 feet, so it's 13 feet off the ground or 13 feet off of the roof here. I mean, we can lower it to one and look, but the point is there's not a lot of line of sight coverage at 13 feet above whatever the tallest item is. If we switch it over to non-line of sight, what we see is it lights up, because you would expect that you're close to the tower, you're shooting through a few trees, and it's like, well, what is my coverage now? So what we do now is we see this, and we see that there's a lot of coverage here for these homes, you know, on the west side of this road. And if I lower, say that you're a provider and you only want to use like neg 70 and above, let's say, or neg 72 and above. So I go down to neg 72 and, or even like neg 70 right here. Let's go to neg 70. And you can see that the coverage is still really good for these homes here on the west side, and that's at a 13-foot mount. And the reason why I chose 13 feet is that's like the size of a height of a one-story home at the pitch of the roof. So let's do this. Let's zoom in to a couple of homes here on the west side of the road. And now what we can see is cnHeat, just like in the past, kind of tells you where's the best place to install at. So you would think that it makes more sense to install on like the pitch of the roof, but that's not really true. And the reason for that is there's a tree right back here, a big tree that is like blocking that coverage at the pitch of the room. So roof, it's a beautiful place to put a tree to offer shade to the home from the south, but it also offers shade for your RF coverage. So if we zoom into here to this northeast corner of the home, over where I zoomed in, and if I click on it right here, we've extended the information bubble, instantaneous information. So you can see we're on the northeast corner of the roof. And now what we do is, in addition to the GPS coordinates, we tell you clutter height, which is 9 foot, which we're telling you at this point of the building, it's 9 foot tall, which makes total sense because 9 foot tall is what the height of a single-story roof is at the edge of the roof at the pitch down. You can configure units to foot to meters, and then what you can see is here's line of sight, which is the above clutter. So the clutter is 9 foot tall, and if you add in another 48 feet, or you go 57 feet up, you can get a line of sight signal at -45. So that's pretty tall to put a little tower to get line of sight. But if we see what the coverage is at the different RSSIs, you can see at this part of the roof, if you install there at 9 foot, you get -78. If you go up 1 foot, you get -72. If you go up 2 feet, you get -66. And if you go up 3 foot, you get -60. So what we're seeing here is cnHeat's telling you don't install in the middle of the roof, install on the edge, and it's giving you a real good guideline as to like I can do minor changes and I can really affect the RSSI that I get for this customer. And like, do I really want to go up 21 feet to get another 6 dB? Probably not. So that's what we wanted to share with you is now you have a way to quickly be able to understand where to install and how high to install. So really want to share with you, this is a 3-dimensional tool that gives you the ability to see at every square meter and vertically where's the best place to install on a property. And you can see that we did this whole explanation in a couple minutes, and your customer service representatives can be taught to do this very, very quickly. Okay, so now let's zoom out and give you another example.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
We actually have a few questions. Did you want to answer those yet?
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
All right. So the first question says, are you using LiDAR for clutter data?
Yeah, the answer is yes. What we do is we typically use LiDAR because it's free, and we convert it to a GIS format that we can work with. We can also get private data if LiDAR doesn't exist in your area. It's more expensive than cnHeat, and we've made that work where the cnHeat works quite well. But yeah, the majority of the data is LiDAR. That's right.
The next one says, can you set the attenuation values for each clutter class?
No, we don't do that. We spent the time, Seth and I, and others, to determine what the proper attenuation should be for the prop model. And so we're handling that ourselves. So that we don't provide control over that, no.
How many kilometers can be reached with no line of sight?
Oh, well, let's just go through like a little demo right here. Okay. So we'll come back to this next thing we're saying. I'll just quickly like zoom out. And just for like cnHeat in general, what we do is we provide 8-mile radius coverage for our sites. So we'll run the propagation out. If I go back up to here to 80-foot high SM, and I bring down the RSSI to -100, what we do is we see that we have an 8-mile coverage right here, radius, and that's what we will do for all the sites. So, okay, all right. So let me zoom back in here to where we were working. And I'll take it back to the next 70. And we'll go back to 13 feet. Okay. And what I want to do is take you to another home here. It's on the north edge right here. And they're right here. And let's do this. We're going to take the opacity, and you can do two things with opacity. You can put it all the way to the right, and you see the coverage map very distinctly, so you can see the places where to install. And you can see how with non-line of sight, it changes because of the environment that you're in. It's not like a static straight line, okay? And then if we go all the way to the left, 0, it shows us like where we're looking at. So like we're looking at specifically this home here calls you for service. And so we're trying to find where's the best place to make an installation at. So if I bring this opacity back to 50%, we can see that probably the best place to install is not on this building or this building, but on this third building right here next to the cars. And so what we can do is if we click on the building right here, we see is there's actually this tree to the right, right? And on the picture, it shows right close to the edge, it's over it. But with the data that we get, like the LiDAR that someone brought out, is it actually shows that this tree is overhanging this edge right here, but that's still the best place to coverage because you're shooting under the tree, right? So we capture that. And you can see right here that the clutter height is 36 feet. So we tell you the height of the tree above this point on the building. And then what we tell you is to get line of sight, you get 38 feet and you get a -46. But if you install at 1 foot, which is on the ground here, or if you install on the building, which is probably 9 foot, you're going to be somewhere in between -60 and -54. So this is what the tool is helping you do, is to understand what your range will be and the heights that it's in between right here, right now. Okay, if we were to click over here to the side, we can see that the coverage has gone down. It's no longer between -60 and 54. It's now between -72 and -66. So that's why it's important that we go over with like what the tool says. So anyway, once again, this points out the ability to do installations and non-line of sight underneath clutter, and you can install it at the height that makes the most sense. And we give you the ability to see the height that you can do it at also right here. Okay. All right. So now what I want to do is just bring up another previous cnHeat. This does not have 3 gigahertz on it. It's a 5 gigahertz. But I just wanted to bring up some points. So as you can see here, this is a customer site with 94 that has 94 cnHeat sites. And I just wanted to share some of the features you get with regards to 3 gigahertz that we have added and we haven't taken away. So like I said, with the benefit of your subscription, what you get is if you have existing sites and they had 3 gigahertz on them, which this one doesn't, you can add them in. But if you have existing sites like this too, and you decide you want to add in 3 gigahertz because you're going to now support CBRS, we'll do that for you as part of the subscription, no added costs. It's just as you can put as many APs as you want up on a site at a time. Okay. Also, there's no change in pricing. So the same pricing that we've had for cnHeat exists, the same after the new feature. So we get the new feature. That's what we try to do with cnHeat, is we add in new features. Well, we have the same pricing model before, so we're trying to bring you continued goodness and increase the value of your subscription. And I brought up that you can put as many APs as you want on each of the on any site that you have. And if you want to make a change to a site over the time of your subscription, I don't know if people realize this, but if you add APs or you move them or take them away, you just let us know and we'll provide that for you, and it's at no cost as part of your subscription. Okay. And then all existing features that we had before, we carry them forward. So like what we came out earlier in this year with the height slider and with the RSSI slider, this definitely is brought forward in any other feature that we would have. As far as like ordering, it's the same part numbers that we have before too, and I'll show you that just as a reminder. Oh, real quickly, one thing I wanted to bring up is, say, usually with line of sight, if we do this, right, if we go back out, I'm going to put this up just as a quick reminder. So when we would zoom out and you would move the slider, right, what you would have is you move the slider all the way to the edge, and as you move it down, the coverage starts to decrease based on the RSSI, and it's a line of sight path model, right? But now when we go back here, let's go back to the 13 feet, and we zoom in and we turn on non-line of sight, what you see here, I'll get rid of this bubble, is as we start to go up, you can see that the coverage dynamically adds into these spots that you didn't have before. So you're seeing all these other colors because it's being affected by the non-line of sight conditions. So it really brings the power of this RSSI slider to light. You can see your RSSI practically on any point. You may never install, of course, at -99, but you can find those places where it would be at, right? And you can go all the way down to here and just see as it dynamically changes in the environment. So I wanted to bring that up. One other point I wanted to make up is, let's go back to this. And I don't know if folks realize this, but when we show coverage here of homes like this, and we zoom into them, and we're giving these line of sight, we're doing like the tool, when we provide for you, it does trillions of calculations, right? Like you click on the building here, right, like we showed before, and we're telling you the various calculations in the vertical from 0 to 80 feet, and we're doing this for every point at every square meter. So what's basically going on is you have the power of like high performance computers, about as the highest end computers that are providing you trillions and trillions of calculations just for your site, so that you can quickly and instantly like figure out where to install. So it's definitely not trivial. What is in here is tons and tons of intellectual property and also computing power. So it's something that we haven't really stressed before, but I really want to like let you know that when that end customer calls you or your installer wants to look at this, you're getting an ability to find everything really quickly, and you're getting it based on trillions and trillions of calculations, not only for the GIS, but also for the prediction itself. So anyway, it's something that nobody else has. Like if you click on other people's products, they tell you what the RSSI is, but then you get like large, like, squares of coverage and things like that are giving you an approximation, but not so with cnHeat. You're seeing reality right where it is at. So you get a clear picture that you can play with. Last thing I wanted to show was just the same thing we talked about, is the pricing and the part numbers are the same as always. So anyway, you can always come talk to your distributor and order them, and nothing has changed here. And with that, I will leave it open for questions.
All right, so we have some other questions here. Seth has been answering some of them as we go. Would you like to go over some of the ones that Seth has answered already?
Yeah, please, that would be great.
All right, so the first one says, is the height setting transmit or receive heights. Can you specify UE/CPE receive height?
Yeah, the height settings are for the subscriber. And so what we're doing here is when you move the height, you're moving up how high the subscriber is. So back to this example down here is when we have it at like 0 feet, this is saying if I install it 0 feet on the ground, I will see this kind of a heat map with these RSSIs. And so these are all the places that we're now looking at with the minimum RSSI of -70 and above that have coverage on the ground for this site. And then if you move it up to like 8 feet, you can see that the coverage, if you had an 8-foot pole or a mount on a home for 8 foot, goes up. And if you keep moving it up, you see how the coverage of the 14-foot pole gets you here. If you moved it up to like a 20-foot pole, it just keeps going up, right? Here I go to 50 foot, and you can see that you can install anywhere if you're willing to do a 50-foot pole. So this is the subscriber height that we're talking about right here. If we go back to the main picture, what we have here is at the site itself, just to give everyone a quick reminder, if you're looking at it, it's the tower, we put the height of the tower, that's a fixed height over here. So that's 195. So that's the fixed tower right here, and this is the subscriber right here, and you dynamically control the subscriber height.
Next question asks, what is the lowest RSSI that will remain serviceable? On 5 gigahertz, we try to stay above a -62. How does this differ?
Well, if my memory serves me right, you can connect down into the low 80s and still maintain a signal at low rates. And as you go up higher, you get better MCSs. And then another thing to be concerned about would be the variability of signal over time, right? As the seasons change and even as the day change, you'll get a little variability. And so what we're showing you here is the average value that's expected from the propagation, but that doesn't mean it can't vary. And inside the user manual, Seth, you have some guidelines on like how much it will actually change. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we don't have the user manual out yet, but one thing to keep in mind when you're running line of sight, it's really easy in your network to look at kind of some standards that you should adhere to. Things like, hey, we don't want to ever install below -62, or we always want to make sure that when we do a speed test, we get this amount of speed for a customer. But in non-line of sight, what we learned going through this exercise is that fading that you can expect is directly proportional to the amount of excess path loss that you have. So in Daniel's comment, he mentioned a -62, and what you might have in non-line of sight is you might have a customer incredibly close to a tower with a -62, and maybe there are some significant trees in the way such that he's experiencing 30 dB or more of path loss, excess path loss. And so what you would expect from UE and SM like that is you would expect to see it over time, if you graphed out the signal level, fluctuate from like a -62 to maybe even up as weak as a -80. And back, as the trees change, as the wind blows, things like that. At the same time, you could take a similar SM, install it maybe 6 miles out. Maybe there's only a single tree in the way. They have a -62, but they have very little excess path loss. And so in that case, you would expect very little fading. So maybe just 5 dB. Maybe you would expect it to go -62 to -67 over time. And so it's hard to just look at the RSL. What we would recommend here, if you're using cnHeat, is compare the RSL that you're about to install to the line of sight. And if there's a huge delta, then you can also expect a huge amount of fading to occur. And we're going to put in the user guide basically a chart of what you can expect for like a 90% availability, how much fading you could expect at individual excess path loss levels.
And let's talk about the excess path loss that Seth is bringing up. So if I go back to this home, right, and I click on it, click on the home. So right here, what we see is line of sight is -45. And if we install the 12-foot, we would be somewhere at -60. So the excess path loss is the delta between the line of sight and what you install at and see. So just to say what you're saying again, please correct me, Seth, if I have it wrong, is as this delta becomes bigger, that affects like the probability that it'll maintain over time.
Yeah, exactly right. If you installed at the 12 feet and there was that 15 dB difference between the -45 line of sight and the -60, there's a certain amount of fading that you would expect. So you are installing a -60, but over time, if you watch the RSL, obviously it's going to fluctuate, and it will fluctuate more based on that delta.
So like if you install at -78, your fading will actually be worse because it's further away from the line of sight value. Okay. Next question. Oh.
The next question asks, how does this translate to urban environments?
That is an excellent question. They are not apple to apple, and we showed the country, and but what we did is we did measurements both in the country like this and in urban environments, and the urban environments behave differently. For example, like most of the time here when you're getting a shot, you're going through trees, but in an urban environment, it may be that you're going to skim across the building, across the street or the house, and or there might be like yeah, so you might hit a building and go through trees at the same time. And so we've tried to capture for that, and so the results will vary, but we believe that our model does address that. And here's the thing that we always appreciate, and we always want to give you a best-in-class product, is when you have the product with us, and if you find an example, like a use case like you're saying, we think we have that one covered, but if you find another use case and you say, hey, the results seem kind of different from the prediction, we want you to reach out to us and say, what's going on here? And we will work with you and take the time to figure that out, and then we will enhance the propagation model. But the answer to your question, it's a great question, is yes, it is different, and yes, it does behave differently.
Would you recommend cnHeat to be used for any PTP or PMP solutions?
Yeah, I do. I'm actually kind of, I would like that. We will work with any product. So if you have a competitor product, anyone's competitor product, we think you should use it with cnHeat, and you don't use Cambium, but that's okay. We are here at Cambium to try to help you, and we want your RF experience to be as good as possible. So definitely we can use it with any product.
The next one asks, how in depth has this been field tested to verify predictions?
We've done a lot of field testing. We've been in different parts of the United States and in different conditions like rural and in cities and in suburbs. And we've taken the data and vetted it against it.
How does this compare to other mapping programs on the market?
My opinion, even though I'm biased, since our product is, we think it's the best product you can buy by far. You're basically getting an RF heat map that's in 3-dimension that tells you what's happening in line of sight and non-line of sight. And it gives you the ability to provide it to an untrained engineer, and they don't realize, because of the simplicity of the tools and how they can go around, they can find the answer quickly. But what's happening is, like I said, there's trillions of calculations going on here to figure out the GIS. There's trillions more calculations going on here to figure out the propagation in 3D. And all I can say, this is not trivial, and I have not seen any other product that mimics these features and gives this type of value.
Are there any plans to migrate the nmos button to 5 gigahertz?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we chose 3 gigahertz first, of course, because of the reasons that we talked about earlier. 3 gigahertz, it has higher EARP, which means it can then shoot through trees more, and also it propagates a little bit better through trees. It's about 25% better propagation. When you look at 5 gigahertz, we don't have as much EARP, and we don't propagate as well. And so typically in 5 gigahertz, when you hit a tree, you're kind of done. But that's not completely true, because people do install a near line of sight shots. It's just not as conducive, and there's a bigger chance of not having signal. We want to extend it to 5 gigahertz. We did 3 gigahertz first, and the use case that we've talked about that we think really would help people is not the high sight, because in general it's a line of sight shot, but it's the low sight where you're doing like micropop. You might have an EPMP micropop or a 450 micropop that's coming out in the near future, and it's only going to shoot a short distance. Well, there's where you definitely need and it'll shoot through trees, some trees, right? Because it's such a short distance, and you have, you don't need as much link budget. So the answer is yes, we want to do it. We don't have it yet, and we would definitely see it for 5 gigahertz, and specifically for a micropop application.
Is there any additional cost, either upfront or recurring, to add CBRS APs and nmos tool to an existing site?
No, it's all part of your subscription. So once you have a site, you can put as many APs and rings of different bands on it as you desire.
There are also a couple of questions related to pricing. Could we talk about that or no?
Yeah.
All right. So one person asks, can you go back to the pricing for cnHeat?
Yep, here we go. So the standard pricing for the heat maps we show you is it's pricing per site. So each site has this, and what we show, I'll tell you why I show this first, of the 3-year subscription where you can pay it every 3 months. And the reason why I do every 3 months is it's a manual process. So really it's $12.50 a month that's paid every 3 months. And so you're saying, is $12.50 a month worthwhile for the costs that I'm paying for the benefit I incur? And the point is we're trying to say, for sure it is, because even on one install, if you avoid a failed install, you're saving 2 hours of time, which is way more than that. And if you're improving where you install, you're doing it much quicker, and you're getting a better signal for your subscriber, and you get better throughputs for your AP. So that's per month. So what we're saying is, even if you collect that over, it's an indication it really is a good value, is what I'm trying to get across. And if you wanted to pay for it for the whole year, there's the price of the whole year. So it's just kind of two different ways to do it. You can pay it up front, or you can pay as you go. We realize that sometimes, it's better to go that way. That's the 3-year. You can also do 1 year, and in 3-year you get an extra year for free. So here's 1 year, it's $212.50. You can see 3 years is $425, and the monthly payments are 50% more because you're not getting the free extra year in here. And if you want to try it out on a site because you're not sure if the site is worth using or whatever, you can easily do a cnHeat site, and for $179 you can figure out, basically what the coverage is and is it worth it or not. for the United States, we have the ability to do addresses. And something we're going to do in the near future is we provide addresses now, but we're going to provide lat and longs very shortly as an additional service. Just the locations, not the addresses too, because we understand that there's people that can take the lat and longs and they can market to the actual location. We partner with Market Broadband, and they can definitely help you if you have the lat and longs. They can get you directly into marketing to that home. So that's something that we're going to add in the near future that allows you a different way to like market your service, but also just to provide general marketing. So they'll be able to help you with the lat and longs, and that actually with the lat and longs we can provide worldwide, not just in the United States. And then if you ever need to find a greenfield site, you just tell us all your SMs and we can let you know through a heat map the best place to put your APs.
The next question asks, does higher MCS rates drop your transmit power on 3 gigahertz the same as it does in 5 gigahertz?
That's a radio question. For the 450M, the answer is no. It maintains it, and I think on the 450i, I thought it was the same. Maybe it drops a dB or two. Seth, do you recall the answer to that any further than what I said?
No, it was my understanding that's something that's true of all radios as they go up in modulation rate too. At some point they have to start dropping the power to keep the noise low, but it may be true that there are radios that don't have to do that.
I'm pretty sure the 450M folks doesn't do that. So if I get it wrong, I'm sorry, but I think that's accurate on the 450M.
There was also a clarification question about pricing, asking when we say price per site, is that per tower?
Yeah, that's right. A site is the same as a tower. So if you have a tower with a specific lat and long location, that's considered as one site. We have people that have APs at every 30 degrees and they have horns around it, and we do that for them. Or we have people that have different rings. That some customers that had have had an LTE base station and a 450M base station, and we've shown both of those on the same site.
Another question asks, what is the timeline on getting an API to be able to integrate into a website for customer pre-qualification?
That is a really good question. APIs, we've been focusing on this and not creating that, but Seth and I have been talking about it, and we really would like the feedback, whoever asked the question is, remember I talked about with Identify, we think what we can do is we can actually provide the building lat and longs from everybody that's covered. And if we give you the building lat and longs, you could then import that into your own web page. It wouldn't be on cnHeat, but you could take that and then people could go into your web page and see whether they have coverage or not on any of those buildings. So I guess what I would like is, could you give us some feedback if that would be a good first step for you or not? I'll do this is after the meeting, Olivia, we can follow up with that person unless they answer back here, or maybe we can get them on the line or something to talk. I don't know if we can mute them, but that's a great question, and we think we can at least provide you the locations of every building that's covered. That way you could show that to people when they dial in. And another thing we might be able to do is we could say, oh, find me the coverage of at a certain height within like 100 feet of the building. And then we could light up the buildings that way too, so you know that there's coverage near it. That's another thing we could do. We'd definitely like to get input back from you on that. But that would be helpful and as a good first step.
Can we pay for one site and change the site location as needed?
That one's no. If we have to move the site location, that's a new site.
The next one asks, would you support other radios from our equipment suppliers?
Yes, we will support any radio you have, and Like for instance, this site right here that I showed earlier, this is a large operation here with a lot of Ubiquity sites on it. And so we model them too. So we would love to model for you whatever you have. Obviously we want you to buy Cambium, but what we're really at as Cambium as a company is we want to help you to succeed. So you have a Ubiquity, a Mimosa, or an LTE solution, we don't mind modeling for that and helping you along.
Are there volume discounts for lots of sites? For example, this Asker has around 25 sites.
The answer is yes, and you would reach out to your RSM. You can also, like, if you don't know your RSM, your regional sales manager, you can always drop a line to me and then I'll get them in touch with you. And yeah, and so we obviously, I can't get into specifics, but if you have a large number of sites, we'll help you with the discount.
And going back to Nick's question about the getting an API to be able to integrate for customer pre-qualification, he says he'd be willing to talk about it. So I could unmute him, or did you want to follow up with him?
Yeah, please unmute, because it'll be a good conversation. It's something we don't have too much of, and we realize that. We always appreciate customer feedback, whether we want to know your thoughts.
Okay, Nick, I'll unmute you if you want to talk.
Hello?
Hello, I can hear you.
Hey guys.
Hi, Nick.
Thanks for taking the time. Yeah, I was interested in the API because whether it's, when somebody types in their address and then it can show the map above their house, and then they can click where they could, preferentially want the equipment to be installed on their roof, and then they could also see with like the signal strength in the bottom left. It could tell them this color means good, this color means bad. Click. It kind of gives them an option, and that way they can really specify and zoom in on their own house and pick it. And yeah, so that's just an idea I had.
It's a great idea, and we've heard that before. We don't have it at the moment, but we want to do it. I can't promise you a timeline. Do you have any other ideas that you would desire?
I like how when you said the excuse me, the Latin longs, and I'm interested to hear about how you can work with, what was the name of that company?
Market Broadband.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see, what that can really do, because as long as we're able to target the people that we can get signal to, it's not wasted money. So I'd like to see how that kind of integration would work with cnHeat.
Okay. Let's do this, Nick. You can email me at offline, daniel.sullivan@cambiumnetworks.com, and then we can continue this further and I can get you in touch. But basically the idea is if we know we have you covered, someone like Market Broadband might be able to help you because they can figure out the IP addresses that have been at that location, and they can do other direct marketing for you.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, talk to me offline and I can get you in touch with the right people and we can talk further.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. All right. Thanks for having him join in, Olivia.
Yep. I think we have time for a couple more questions. This attendee asks, can you print out a report that gives the potential customers address and location on the customer premises for potential service?
So what we do today is we offer the addresses for an additional cost at a quarter an address. What we're thinking of doing is instead of just doing the addresses, we could do it in a couple ways. We could provide the Latin longs that people desire alone, or they could do the Latin longs with the addresses together like we have at the quarter, because you get the Latin longs for that. Or you could start with your Latin longs and then buy the addresses up separately if you want. So those are the things that we're thinking we can do that would go with the actual locations. Typically, this is an additional cost because we have to take the time to do the intersection of the heat map with the actual buildings themselves.
And Todd asks, how do we do what ifs, especially as we get ready to bid for RDOF auctions?
So for RDOF, is Todd on the line? We can talk about this. It would be better, I think, as opposed to me answering the question incorrectly.
Yes, Todd, I can unmute you if you want to talk on the line.
There you go, testing 1, 2. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, on the RDOF auction, it's a pole placement, tower placement, as we try to reach into some underserved areas. This would be a great tool which would allow us to look at how we bid on a particular census block area. So if we had a tower and it's a what if site, would that be available? How do we load those in? Do we have to go through you, or can we load those in ourselves?
On the what if site, if it's a single site and it needs to be run, then we can run the single site for you. If it's a large area like a census block or many census blocks in a county, okay, so let's just kind of show this in different ways. So you've seen, like, we've talked all today about single sites and the coverage. So if you did a single site and you ran it, you could see the coverage just like this. And that does it for 179. But if you don't know where your site is going to be, then we offer something different that we didn't talk about at the presentation. Real quickly, if I go down, we have an ability, and it's called Optimize, that we can do it one of two ways. We have one way where you just tell us all your SMs, which would be your RDOF locations, their X, Y, and Z, where you want to connect. And then what happens is we can give you a heat map that then shows you where's the best place to put your tower. Now, that could be a slow process back and forth with us if you want to go do many places and they would overlap with each other, right? You have adjacent census blocks. We also have an ability, it's not as honed up, it's like a manual tool where we can allow you to figure out, we can provide you the GIS information and a front end to a tool, and you could get stuff even up to like a county-wide basis. I don't have any of the pricing or any of that here, but you could figure this out dynamically where you work it on your own, like you figure out this census block, then that census block, and you can dynamically figure out where to place your access points, and you can do it as many times as possible and on your own time. And you would be doing these, we call them like a reverse coverage. Tell me the coverage based on these SMs, then you can go and do the forward coverage like a heat map from there to make sure that everything's covered on your RDOF.
That's great.
Sense, Todd? Or so if you have further questions about it, you can email me and we can spend more time discussing it and see what's the right way that we can help you.
Could you repeat that email again?
Yeah, it's daniel.sullivan@cambiumnetworks.com. So hold on. So you just take my name and put the period in between and put @cambiumnetworks.com.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yep.
I can also include Daniel's email in the follow-up email that's set to go out in 24 hours for all attendees.
Yeah.
Do we have a map of areas that have LiDAR coverage outside of the USA?
Yes and no. What we do is we track every country in the world and where they have LiDAR and they don't have LiDAR. And so we have like it on a spreadsheet where we got to figure out how to access the data and get it. So the answer is yes. Originally, and there was a map that was that is actually on our website, cnHeat.cambiumnetworks.com/software/cnHeat. Excuse me, it's cambiumnetworks.com/software/cnHeat. You can get there through the website. And it was showing what countries had some coverage and what doesn't. It needs to be updated. It's about a year old. But if you have a question for a certain country, just ask me and I'll look it up.
Yeah, we did also have another attendee ask when this product would be available in the Central and South America markets.
All right, so I know the answer to that. There's no LiDAR in Central America or South America except for the Caribbean, for islands that have U.S. relationships. Like Puerto Rico has data. The Virgin Islands, both the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands both have coverage too. But the other islands at this point don't. And Central America doesn't, and neither does South America. You have to purchase the data.
I think we've gotten through most of the questions now. So did you want to do any polls for the audience?
Yeah, real quickly, we would like a couple polls. Here's the idea is, they're kind of simple questions is, here's a belief I have, and it could be wrong, and I think would help us also on our 450 businesses. We kind of want to know what sites you have in what percentage in 5 gig and 3 gig, and then what you think you're going to migrate to in the near future. So 5 gig has always been harder the more and more trees that are there, and now with 450M and CBRS and all our 450 products, we can open that up with the higher powers, and you can reach more and more homes. We can tell you how to get there. So if you would spend some time just taking the poll and letting us know what your future desires are, that would be beneficial. It's just strictly trying to get an understanding of what you think you're going to be doing as far as sites in the near future. Real briefly, everyone, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming to the webinar.
All right, we'll leave this poll open for about another half a minute, and then we'll share the results. All right, it looks like we have about half of attendees who've responded, so I can close the poll and share the results. So can you see on the screen the results, Dan?
I do. So it says 30% of the people responding have 100% 5 gig, and 36% have 3/4 5 gig, and 25% 3 gig. 14% are 50-50. 14% have 3/4 3 gig, and 1/4 5 gig, and 4% are all 3 gig.
All right, so we can open up the next poll too. So these are for future deployments, right?
Yeah, I'd like to understand what folks think is going to happen in the future.
All right, and I'll share the results on that. We had about 60% of attendees respond to this one.
Okay, and yeah, what I'm seeing is 7% are going to be 100% CBR or 3 gig, 25% will be 3/4, 23% will be 50%, 50/50, and 34% will be 3/4 5 gig, and 11% will be all 5 gig. So it seems like the balance of, there's still a majority of radios still going to 5 gig, but it's catching up pretty quickly in 3 gig. I appreciate everybody sharing that. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan and Seth, for taking the time to speak to us today. We'll get a follow-up email recording to attendees within 24 hours. And I'll also include Dan's email and any other relevant information, as well as information about more upcoming Cambium Networks webinars. So thank you for joining and have a good day.
All right, bye everybody. Thank you.